So now we're ready to integrate device hardware from our mobile device.
This video is brought to you by ObbyPie's Academy.
On the right side of my screen, you're seeing a reflection of my mobile device screen running the PhoneGap mobile app. On the left side of the screen, you can see the code that we're going to be running. And we're actually going to be demonstrating the accelerometer. The accelerometer is what senses the unit's relationship to the ground. So you can't see, but I am moving the device around, and you can see changes in the X, Y, and Z axis. If I rotate the device forward, you can see how the numbers change. I'm going to lay my device flat on the table, and notice the X and Y axis get very, very close to 0. Of course, it's very sensitive, so the device isn't completely flat, and if it's in some type of frame, so as I move it off the table, you can see the Y axis moving quite a bit. If I click Stop Watching, it stops watching the actual accelerometer, and we no longer get these readings. Now, we can use these readings for just about anything, but this is another way to get input from the device. So first off, there is a plugin structure that works with PhoneGap. What that means is there's dozens of plugins that fill the gap between the hardware and PhoneGap and the JavaScript that you write. We're looking at the config XML file. The config XML file, of course, is part of what's built by the PhoneGap app when you build a new application. So you can see some of the things we can access here, like battery status, the camera, that's a lot of fun, media capture. I'm going to skip a few of these, but we also have contacts, and the one we're accessing here is called device motion. There's also one for device orientation, but that's actually a different plugin. Now, any plugin that appears here and is implemented in your code will be automatically loaded when you build or test using the PhoneGap app. If we were doing this using Cordova, not using the PhoneGap tools, we'd have to manually install these plugins. But we don't have to worry about it because we're using the PhoneGap toolset. Frankly, that's one of the benefits. You can see here PhoneGap also has its own geolocation, it's got its own in-app browser, and all of these are documented within the PhoneGap site. So we're going to be focusing on device orientation, and I've already written a program that accesses the device orientation and gives us the X, Y, and Z axis readout that you saw a few moments ago. Let's go ahead and go over that set of code. So, of course, we have our regular PhoneGap template, and if we look at the HTML, it's very simple. I have here, this is a little bit of an older set of code. So on the onload event, we're calling the onload function, which is up here. And I'll explain what's going on there in a minute. We have a div for the accelerometer, which initially simply says waiting for accelerometer. We have the two buttons that you saw, the on-click button Start Watch and the on-click button Stop Watch. These are the events that are run when the button is clicked. We start watching and we stop watching, and you'll see these functions in just a second. All right, so now let's go over the code. First, we have a global variable for watch ID, which is initially set to null. And then we have our onload function, which is run when the page loads. Now, if you look here, we have document add event listener device ready. The device ready event occurs when all the PhoneGap libraries are loaded, the screen is drawn, when everything is ready to move. And we call on device ready when that happens. Now, you can't test in the browser with device ready because there is no device ready event in the browser, only within a phone running PhoneGap. So we're going to call on device ready when the device ready event occurs. And that simply is going to call start watch. Now, first on Start Watch, we have an options section in which we set the frequency to 1,000, and that's how many milliseconds between readings of the accelerometer. So depending on the sensitivity you need, this may be okay, but you may want to set this down so the accelerometer reads 10 times a second or 100 times a second. It's really up to you and your application. Keep in mind, however, that reading the accelerometer does require some amount of resources on the device, so you don't want to do it more than necessary. So now we're going to call Navigator, Accelerometer, and the Watch Acceleration method. The Watch Acceleration method has two callback functions. The first is the function we call back if we're successful in starting the accelerometer, and then is an error method which is callback if we are not successful in starting the accelerometer. And then we feed that some options. So this is returned to a watch ID. That's an ID that just tracks the actual accelerometer, and it allows us to stop the accelerometer when we're ready to. So if we get a successful accelerometer reading, we're going to call on success. Remember, now this is going to happen with this frequency 10 times a second. We're going to pass that success function an acceleration object. We're going to then, inside where we're going to put our result in element, which we retrieve by document, get element by ID accelerometer. So we're retrieving this div, and we're going to set the inner HTML to the readout. Acceleration X is gotten from that acceleration object passed in, and the X property. We also have an acceleration Y property, an acceleration Z property, giving us the X, Y, and Z axis for the accelerometer. We also have our acceleration timestamp, which is simply timestamps when the actual accelerometer reading was taken. So we then put that in the display so the user can see it. If the user clicks the Stop Watching button, the stopwatch function will run. If there is a watch ID, we simply clear the accelerometer by calling Navigator, Accelerometer, Clear Watch, and Watch ID. Let me bring our screen back up here, and let's just kind of run through the code real quick with this active. So if I click Start Watching on my phone, the accelerometer again becomes active. So Start Watch is run, and we're getting our actual reading 10 times a second. We're getting that by calling Navigator, Accelerometer, Watch Acceleration, which will watch the acceleration until we stop it. When we successfully get an accelerometer reading, we're going to call on success. On success is going to get the acceleration object, and then it's going to place in the user interface the string that we're assembling here. The label acceleration X, and then the value from the acceleration object, acceleration.x, which you're seeing right here. Acceleration Y, and then the acceleration.y value. We can change that significantly. I'm lifting my phone off the table and holding it almost straight up and down at 90 degrees. And you can see how the Y value changes. We go flat back onto the table. We then get the Z value and the timestamp. When I touch Stop Watching, the accelerometer stops, and we get that by checking if there is a watch ID, and then using Navigator, Accelerometer, Clear Watch. So in this segment, we've learned to interface with the hardware. We've looked at the plugin structure and how to interact specifically with the accelerometer plugin using PhoneGap and JavaScript.